Hello again. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Space Nuts. My name is Andrew Dunkley. Great to have your company. Hope you're well. Coming up on this episode, and by the time you hear this, Artemis 2 should be on its way to the moon. But more importantly, we're going to talk about their plumbing. That's very interesting. We'll also talk about CSIRO involvement in the mission and NASA's announcement about a moon base. It'll have toilets too. More news on the ISS crew evacuation in January and some real astronomy with the discovery of a second-generation star. What is a second-generation star? We'll tell you in a second.
15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 10, 9, ignition sequence start.
Space Nuts.
5, 4, 3, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Space Nuts.
Astronauts report it feels good.
And he's back for more. He is Professor Fred Watson, astronomer at large. Hello, Fred.
Hello, Andrew. I'm back for more, yes. And very excited because of where we are in the story of human exploration in the moon.
Yes.
Of the moon.
Yeah, it is very exciting. All these years after the Apollo missions, and it looks like systems are go. Touch wood. I've got a wooden table. But yes, by the time people hear this, it should be well on its way. So we keep our hopes ever positive for Artemis 2. Let's get straight into talking about the mission. Launch aside, there's a lot of cooperation that goes into missions like these, and that was the case with Apollo and many other missions, space shuttle missions, etc. since then. And this is no different. There's a lot of involvement, and our very own CSIRO, the National Science Agency, is involved.
Indeed it is, via NASA's Deep Space Network, which is actually managed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California, part of NASA. But that is going to be responsible for communication with the Orion spacecraft, which is the vehicle that's taking the Artemis 2 crew round the moon. They will be responsible for those communications while it's not in low Earth orbit. In other words, while it's sort of on the way to the moon, going round the moon and on the way back. And so it's the Deep Space Network has 3 facilities, one at Goldstone in California, one near Madrid in Spain, and one near Canberra in Australia. And that's at Tidbinbilla. It's quite a major communications centre, the Tidbinbilla Deep Space Network station there, place we've visited several times, and has some fantastic equipment, including some very big dishes. That is going to be part and parcel of the Artemis 2 mission. So it's great that Australia is playing an enabling role in that, because the reason why you have 3 of these stations, more or less equidistant around the Earth, is that as the Earth turns, there will always be one of them which can contact any given spacecraft, except if that spacecraft happens to be Voyager 2, which can only be communicated with by the Tidbinbilla facility because it is in the southern hemisphere sky.
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's so far away now. You can't really... the angles are all wrong, I think.
That's right.
Is that how it
the
works?
angles are wrong for the... Yes, it is. So that for the other, for the 2 northern hemisphere stations, it's below their horizon permanently. So, Voyager 2, of course, carries no humans. It's a robotic
that
spacecraft.
We know of.
They're doing well if they're still there after 50
Might be some
odd years.
microbes.
Yeah, there could be microbes. In fact, there almost certainly will be microbes in it, probably playing cards in a corner somewhere waiting for some suitable solar system to come along in about 5 billion years' time.
Yeah, that's something to think about, isn't it?
It is. That's right. Yes, it's our way of colonising the universe.
I suppose back to the CSIRO involvement, and if anyone's seen that great Australian movie, The Dish, they'll know that the Parkes Radio Telescope was very much at the centre of communications with the Apollo 11 moonwalk and relaying a lot of that radio traffic from the lunar surface. So we've got a history of it.
Indeed.
It's a very funny film and a lot of creative license. But
yes,
gee,
in fact,
it really put parks on the map, didn't it?
Yes, where it should have put Tidbinbilla on the map because they did most of the work, apparently.
I believe so.
Always been a bone of contention because Tidbinbilla, and in fact the dish that they did, in fact it wasn't at Tidbinbilla then, it was a place called Oral Creek, if I remember rightly, which is also near Canberra. But the dish that was used there for the Apollo missions was actually, it's not used anymore, but it was recited to Tidbinbilla, so for the Deep Space Network. And yes, I don't think I mentioned in my intro there that the CSIRO operates that facility on behalf of NASA, the Commonwealth Science and Industrial Research Organisation.
Yeah. Terrific people, and they do a lot of work in silence. They do obviously publish their findings, but or their work or whatever it is they're doing. But people tend not to really notice them much, which is unfortunate. But,
I thought that was going to be a pun there, because a lot of them have to do with radio silence, to do with protecting radio astronomy facilities, and that's one of the things. But you're absolutely right; they are the unsung heroes in many ways of the Australian scientific world. It's the National Science Agency.
Indeed. So that's one aspect of this particular mission with the Australian Communications involvement. Let's talk about the toilet. What's going on with the toilet?
I'm glad you asked me about that. The main thing is that, believe it or not, there is one on the Apollo capsule, which is what the Artemis 2 crew will be riding to and around the moon in. It's got this private enclosure in the Apollo capsule itself. Apparently it's accessible through a hatch in the floor of the spacecraft, but floor doesn't matter when you're in zero gravity. It's not big. Apparently it's about the size of the restroom on a small passenger jet, and it was actually built by Lockheed Martin, who build passenger jets as well, I think, still. Unlike the Apollo missions, in which 3 male astronauts had to virtually improvise over their more or less 10-day trips to the moon and back, this toilet facility has echoes of the toilet facilities on the International Space Station. It's referred to not as a bathroom but as a hygiene bay. It's got a door. There's a hinging door in the floor of the floor of the Orion capsule, through which the astronauts can access this hygiene bay. And you can either shut the door, or if you need a bit more room, there's a curtain that you can use. So one of the quotes I love from actually one of the astronauts who's talking about their mission coming up: "You would float over to the door, open up the hinging door and float on in," is what they said. The idea of floating into your bathroom.
Floating in is okay, but floating out, that's a worry.
What might float out with you, that's the worry. But that's all taken care of by a fan, apparently. So, and squishing things down.
Oh, okay.
No, I think actually it's a polythene bag. I think it's a fan on the International Space Station, but not in the Orion capsule.
As long as you don't have to waffle stomp it.
Okay, that sounds like, yes, I can sort of, that conjures up a picture in my mind that I'd rather not have, really.
I'm sure they'll be wearing boots.
No, it's what you do when you take your dog to the dog park. You end up with something like that.
Possibly so. But this is interesting because back in the Apollo era, they didn't have anything remotely exotic like this. They had plastic bags, apparently.
Yep. And sort of slip-on facilities that would only work for a male. Yep. So that's all right.
Thankfully, they've caught up with the times, and hopefully all works well.
Yeah, there is another subtlety, Andrew, that might be of interest, and that is, and we've talked about this before, the urine on the International Space Station, which is an everyday product by its inhabitants, is actually recycled in a bid to make the International Space Station as free from, as sustainable as possible, I guess is the way to put it. They recycle that and use it for drinking, which is extraordinary. Why don't we do that on Earth? Well, you can do it in space. But I do remember in the early days of the International Space Station, they didn't do that. They used to dump the urine into space. And I can't remember which astronaut it was who made that famous quote, "There's nothing more beautiful in space than a urine dump at dawn," which is when the low angle of the sun catches all these ice crystals, which is what they are. Now, that is what they're going to do on Orion, because their mission is short enough that they don't need to go through the recycling process. They can carry enough water with them, and so they will maybe see a urine dump at dawn. Who knows?
Okay, could be interesting. I'm not sure that they'll broadcast it. They're broadcasting quite a bit, though, which will be fascinating. So we'll be able to keep an eye on things, just certain things we probably don't want to keep an eye on. But while we're talking about the moon, there is one more story that's making headlines, and that is an announcement by NASA for a moon base. That's
correct.
Really,
yes.
Yeah, they've obviously been behind closed doors maing a lot of plans, and now they're ready to go public.
A lot has changed actually in the last month. We've got Apollo 3 being not the first landing on the moon, but an exercise in low Earth orbit, which will test out the capabilities of both the SpaceX and the Blue Origin versions of the lunar lander. And then Artemis 4 will be the landing process itself, the lunar landing, hopefully in 2028. But the other big announcement, exactly as you've said, from Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, the boss of NASA, is the idea of an appropriation, that's the word, of $20 billion over 7 years in order to build a permanent moon base on the lunar surface. And that's a change in philosophy, because it was not seen as being, Artemis was seen as more exploratory, with only the very later stages of the Artemis program settling anything like a permanent base on the moon. But it looks as though over the next 7 years, that money is going to be spent on actually setting up shop on the moon for perhaps long-term, maybe even permanent habitation, teaching us how to live on an alien world. One consequence of this is that the project to have a mini International Space Station in orbit around the moon, which was called the Gateway spacecraft, that has been put on pause, which probably means it's dead, I would guess, even though some of the main contractors have put a lot of effort into it. And in fact, I think most of the Gateway already exists, but it's being put on pause. It may one day be invigorated to be useful for astronauts visiting the moon, but at the moment it's on hold.
Fair enough too. I guess putting a permanent base on the moon is going to be divisive too. A lot of people don't think that's a good idea, but if NASA doesn't do it, somebody will.
That's correct, yes. And we know who it'll be.
Probably.
Yes.
Probably. Yeah. All right. Those stories are all available via the NASA website. You can also read about the CSIRO through their own website, CSIRO.au. And the space toilet, well, I think that's probably on every website of the popular press, but you can read about it on space.com as well. This is Space Nuts with Andrew Dunkley and Professor Fred Watson.
Roger, you're loud and clear here also.
Space Nuts.
Now, some time ago, we did a story about a crew evacuation on the International Space Station involving involving an astronaut, 59-year-old Mike Finke. At the time, it was pretty scary, but they got him back to Earth pronto, and there's been a bit more information released about what transpired. However, we still don't know exactly what happened to him.
That's right. We really only found out very recently that that's the identity of the astronaut who caused that evacuation back in January. Mike Finke, as you've said, or Fink, he apparently suffered some kind of seizure. We're not sure what. I might just quote this is actually a phys.org article, but it's probably quoting NASA material. He was just eating dinner on January the 7th after getting ready for a spacewalk the next day when he could not talk. He suddenly lost the ability to talk and said he remembers no pain, but his anxious crewmates, I'm quoting here, jumped into action after seeing him in distress and requested help from flight surgeons on the ground. Fink said it was completely out of the blue. It was just amazingly quick, and said the episode lasted about 20 minutes. He felt perfectly okay afterwards and still does. Has never experienced anything like that before or since. Things that have been ruled out are a heart attack and probably some other stroke type symptoms, things of that kind.
Yeah, they ruled out choking.
Yes.
But, yeah, there's a lot of theory going around as to what it could have been, whether it was something to do with his physiological response to being in space for so long, because he's been up there a few times. One of the suspicions is a clotting issue. One of the other suggestions is some kind of issue in the spine that might have affected him. But it's all theory. They don't actually know at this point what happened.
No. One thing that is being done is thoroughly checking the astronauts. The medical records of other astronauts who've flown on the International Space Station, because the total number now it's probably 500 or so. I can't remember the number of people who've been into space, just to see whether there's any other related instances, anything similar to this in any way. There is an issue here. I'm once again quoting from phys.org. The astronaut said he can't provide any more details about his medical episode. The space agency wants to make sure that other astronauts do not feel that their medical privacy will be compromised if something happens to them, which is completely fair enough. He's... Apparently, he's stopped apologising to everybody after he was ordered to stop by Jared Isaacman, the NASA boss. This wasn't you. This was space, right? His colleagues assured him. You didn't let anybody down.
No, look, we're human. These things happen. And you've got to remember what a hostile environment space is. It's not friendly. And... it won't be the last time something happens to somebody in space, I don't doubt, because more and more and more and more and more people are going to end up in space doing whatever. There'll probably be a McDonald's up there one day, but things will happen. It's just whenever you expose yourself to a hostile environment, something's got to give occasionally. And the good news is he's alive and well and seems to be okay now. But what happened, how it happened, I suppose they'll just keep investigating and maybe come up with an answer at some stage. I think the sad part for him is that he may well be grounded now.
Yeah, he's apparently still hopeful of flying again, as I'm sure all astronauts are. But yes, he might be grounded. That's right. It might just be seen as a step too far. What surprises me, Andrew, is that we found out anything about this at all, because NASA was completely silent about who was involved and what the issue was. It wasn't an emergency, but it was something that they felt they needed to get the astronauts onto the ground quickly. What I didn't know as well is that there's a portable ultrasound machine on the space station.
Yeah, they've got some gear up there.
They've got some gear up there, that's right, yeah.
Which probably was handy. So it would have ruled out a few things immediately. But, the good news is he's back in the land of the living. Well, he never left, but we still don't know what happened. But if you want to read about it, you can find that story at phys.org. This is Space Nuts with Andrew Dunkley and Professor Fred Watson.
Space Nuts.
All right, our final story, Fred, is a real astronomical story with the discovery of what they're claiming is a second-generation star. So, look, straight up, what is a second-generation star?
Well, a first-generation star would be one of the first generation of stars formed in the universe. So after the Big Bang, the universe was, well, it was a hot plasma for quite a while, cooled off, leaving basically cold hydrogen and some helium and a few other trace elements. But it was the hydrogen collapsing on itself in clouds that led to the first stars being formed. So that would be the first generation of stars. The second generation would form as a result of the first generation of stars coming to an end, or more gas clouds collapsing. But the trace thing is, and this is how astronomers are suspicious that this object, by the way, it's called PIC 2503, which I quite like. It's in a what's called an ultra-faint dwarf galaxy, one of the galaxies in orbit around our own Milky Way galaxy. And it's a very faint galaxy indeed. What gives away its second generationness, if I can put it that way, is elements which are found in its atmosphere, which would have been produced by supernova explosions of first generation stars. So a supernova explosion is when a star collapses at the end of its short life. It's burned up all its hydrogen fuel. It's been generating other elements. It collapses. There's an explosion, and a lot of debris is spread into space. Some of that forms the next generation of stars. This is a process that's still going on today. This process of enrichment of the what's called the interstellar medium, the gas between the stars. So that enrichment of that, of that second generation star formation region included chemicals that could only have been produced in a first generation star explosion. And it's all about the ratios of iron and calcium and things of that sort.
Okay, well, that answers my next question. So I guess the question that follows that is, this has made news, obviously, because this is not something we find every day. Is it a rare find?
It is very rare, yes. It's not unprecedented. I think there's at least one more hypothesized second-generation star in a dwarf galaxy. This, however, is particularly old. So the second generation probably, went over a period of time, a few 100 million years perhaps. But what we're seeing here is something that happened right at the beginning of that process. So the observations were, the star itself was discovered in Chile on a telescope not that different from our Anglo-Australian telescope here in Australia. It's something that people who do stellar astronomy looking at stars and studying the stars, they are always interested in looking out for these what are called very metal-poor stars. Now, a metal to an astronomer is anything other than hydrogen and helium. It's all the heavier elements. So, carbon's a metal and silicon's a metal.
Oxygen?
Things of that sort. Oxygen's a metal too, yes.
Yeah.
Sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's an old terminology that came at the beginning of spectroscopy, astronomical spectroscopy in the 1860s, 70s. We've called them metals ever since, even though by our normal terminology they're not metals. But so stars which don't have much of iron or calcium or oxygen or anything like that are called metal poor. And the search for metal poor stars is a very active area of stellar astronomers, involving some of the scientists I know very well because I used to work with them on similar projects.
So, what generation star would our sun be?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know the answer to that, but the sun's atmosphere is at a fairly high level of enrichment in terms of what it's telling us about the gas climate when it was born 4.6 billion years ago. So it would be a late generation of stars, and I guess. I don't know. It's a good question, Andrew. We're probably talking about dozens of generations rather than just 4 or 5 or something like that.
Wow.
Since the Big Bang.
Amazing. We don't want it to be too old, because if it's too old, then, it might give up the ghost sooner than we want.
No, that's right. It's already doing quite well. It's at an earlier stage in its life than I am in mine. I think that's probably the way to put it.
I think for most of us, if that's the case.
Yeah, it might be. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, indeed. All right, very interesting news. A second-generation star. You can read all about it at sciencenews.org, or you can find the paper, which is available at Nature Astronomy. It's called PIC 2503 if you want to check it out. That just about brings us to the end. Fred, thank you so much.
Yes, very exciting show this week. We might have an even more exciting one next week.
Lots and lots and lots of things to talk about, and lots of amazing things happening here and beyond. So, good one, real good one. Thanks, Fred. We'll catch you on the next episode, coming soon.
Thank you, Andrew. See you then.
Professor Fred Watson, astronomer at large. And don't forget to visit us online or on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on something else, I can't remember. Oh, that X thing. Yeah, we're on that. Or you can visit our website, spacenuts.io, and have a look around, visit the shop, click on the supporter link, or send us a question or a comment through the Ask Me Anything tab at the top. It's all available at spacenutspodcast.com or spacenuts.io. And thanks to Hugh in the studio, who couldn't be with us today. Being an ex-radio man, he thinks he's a first-generation star. It just makes him very slow. He couldn't get here in time. And from me, Andrew Dunkley, thanks for your company. We'll see you on the next episode of Space Nuts. Bye-bye.
Space Nuts. You've been listening to the Space Nuts podcast.
Mission complete, Houston.
Available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favourite podcast player. You can also stream on demand at Bytes.com.
This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.